Hi, I'm Alex, and I'm here today with Nate Sterling, one of my really good friends who works at Grid Smarter Cities. He is a design strategist, is that correct?
Yeah, yeah.
Official title. So I was looking at your LinkedIn before, and then I found the first line of your summary is Nate is a hyperactive, playful catalyst, love that, who utilises service design thinking and design-led innovation practices to help organisations better understand, focus and act upon their innovation opportunities. What does this mean?
I don't think you have to spend that long around me to kind of understand I'm hyperactive. Today, for example, it's a Saturday during a lockdown, being for a 50k cycle, and now I'm, doing this. I'm just always doing stuff. I can't help it. And the same way, if I'm just very energetic. So yeah, playful. I don't take anything too seriously. And my hobbies probably haven't changed since I was a teenager. Catalyst. I like to make things happen. And in terms of my job, that's very much how I see kind of the role of design. So I've got a background education in industrial design, where I focused on service design, and then I did a master's in design innovation. So how you apply design to business. And then I was an academic for a couple of years, focusing on. That's where I met you when we were running the business support program, looking at how we can help SMEs with their innovation opportunities and just kind of their state of kind of innovation at the moment. Then, yeah, I joined Grid as a design strategist. Not surprised you don't know what it means. Kind of made it up myself. Was hired without a job title, so that was cool. But quite simply, I use design to help inform things, to plan things. So I guess if you look at my last month, I've been working with the design team. We've redesigned rebranded alongside the comms team, rebranded a product. We built a website, looking at the previous test feedback and improving the UI. And then we've planned and we've just started another trial of the product. So my role in that is basically collaborating with, the necessary people, kind of leading the design team, ensuring they know what they need to do. And then, just building on it. It's really fun.
So for background, we met at Get Ready to Innovate was the name of it, I think.
Yeah.
I at the time was running a marketing company, and I met you, and that's what we were doing for, was it 3 weeks, I think, was innovating a whole new service.
Yeah.
To sort of get a cut into the market that hadn't really been tapped before. And even though that company is no longer around, that was probably one of the most valuable experiences I've had as a professional, because it gave me a whole new insight into how to develop a service from scratch, basically, and all the elements that go into that. It was very interesting, which is why obviously I've brought you in now, and I still come to Nate all the time for when I've got ideas, and you know this too well. I'm one of these people, I've always got new ideas. Some of them come in tin something, some of them don't, but that's, the nature of it. But I always go to Nate because he's the best person for kind of fleshing out the idea and building on it and helping me actually understand it myself. So the reason I asked you today to do this is because ideation and innovating new services or products is relevant regardless of the current situation.
Yeah.
Organizations should always be looking to ideate and innovate and develop products. However, now we're at a point where a lot of businesses who might be watching this have been forced to do that because of the current situation. Whether, it's a restaurant, for example, all the way through to even just service agencies, depending on what you're offering. It also sometimes just comes down to the fact that their clients can no longer afford what they're offering, and they need to come up with something it might be cheaper, but still produces a turnover. So there's loads of different scenarios as to why this might be the situation, but there's also as well other people during this period of isolation, if you do have a bit of extra time, you might be coming up with new ideas for a new business that you haven't even started yet. So I'd say this is probably relevant to across the spectrum, really. Mm-hmm. But what I wanted to ask is basically, if you're a business, or even if you're just coming up with an idea, whatever that may be, and you want to turn it into a business and you want it to be profit generating, where do you start? Like, what's the starting point for you at the very beginning of the process, basically?
The first step really is separating yourself from the idea, so you can be critical of it. because if you're not critical of it from the beginning, then you're not being honest, and you're not being honest with yourself and the context the idea is going to operate in. So first things first is take it away from yourself, treat it as a separate entity, and play with it. Test it in the immediacy in terms of the people around you. Ask them, have you heard of it? Jump on Google, do a kind of competitor search, all that kind of stuff. But the real thing is refining what kind of problem or challenge or need you're resolving for people. If you want to talk about profit, then that's an exchange, right? So you have to identify where the value is and what it is you're really doing for people, because you can say a takeaway is a food delivery, but what is it you're doing? You're giving them convenience. So try to understand like your value and kind of what separates you from maybe what already exists or doesn't.
So when you finally get into that, and once you start getting a role and you've started refining your idea and you're building on it, what would you say are the most important things to consider when innovating or designing a new product or service? So what, to make sure that you stay on the right track and not go off in too many different tangents, for example?
Yeah, I think like managing, like the term is scope. So managing the scope of the idea. Don't try and do everything like from the beginning. Like be really focused. Try and solve a really small problem for a lot of people really quickly, rather than try and solving loads of problems for loads of people. I think, being really focused in the beginning and identifying who it is you're really, targeting with this idea, this product, this service, whatever it is. And then doing your best to kind of find out as much as you can about that group. What it is, if it's a consumer product, how do they like to shop? How do they like to be targeted with ads? I mean, most of us don't like to be targeted, but the fact is we are. So how are you going to reach them? What's the tone of the messaging, the imagery, all that, and you can just start to play with it. It's not a step-by-step process. So you're going to go back to things. You're going to go down some dead ends. You're going to realize that actually that bit's no good, and that's fine. That's part of the process. I think once again, if you separate yourself from the idea, you're not as precious. So that means you can be a bit more critical, a bit more rigorous, a bit more harsh on the idea.
And that kind of comes back to the testing aspect of it, I suppose. It's not step by step and it's not a linear path. You're going to go off certain directions and you're going to have to come back to certain things. There'll be probably times you go back to square one if something doesn't work. So where does testing fit into this? What kind of like tools and techniques would you use to test a design idea?
Well, I mean, usually when, we're not in these very kind of strange circumstances, we engage in like workshops. So, you've been part of it. And I was very fortunate to learn from some fascinating and brilliant facilitators. I mean, you experienced it yourself with my old boss and colleague, Mark. He's just sensational. So we like to do it with people. It's the reason I use the word catalyst, because I'm not a designer in the maybe the traditional sense of I'm the one who creates this beautiful piece or this beautiful service. That's not my interpretation of design. I like to use design to help and collaborate and build with people. So the main thing for me is just really engaging with individuals, but obviously now you can do it online. So you can figure out ways of prototyping and generating kind of your idea, generate things to make your idea a bit more tangible. And share them with people. I think another thing when people think they have a good idea, they hold it to themselves. Most of the time, the idea isn't new, it isn't original, it isn't, an invention. So don't be so attached to sharing it, because what's really the thing you want to protect is the execution of that idea. So if you come up with a new delivery service, what is the thing you're protecting? It's probably how you do it, not the fact it's a delivery service. So in the early stages, share the ideas, and don't be afraid to be critiqued, because inevitably, what do you want? Failure when you're launching and trying to make profit, or failure when you're trying to learn? So nice and early, and don't be too precious. Once again, it comes back to that. It's really hard though. So I think the term people use is creative confidence. So to really have that creative confidence, to be able to come up with ideas, pluck them out, play with them, build them up, toss them over to you, bring them back and go, actually, no, it's all right, we'll go again. you know, that's the kind of process you need to grow comfortable with. And it's not easy, because it's disheartening when, you know, I've had countless projects where you thought, yes, we've smashed this out of the park, it's going to be the one, and then it doesn't really connect the same way. So don't be too attached to that feeling, you know, be uncomfortable, fine, you know, it doesn't last, keep moving, and just, learn as quickly as you can, in the sense of like, as you can, you know. I think there's an emphasis on learning quickly, and that's really good, but as you can, you know, not everyone is trained in building businesses and designing services and objects. And I think if you are maybe trying to build a business from a hobby and a craft, business is very different to creating a product like an object or a piece of art or something like that. So don't be too harsh on yourself. It's a process too, and seek out people. I think there's loads of people out there that are happy to, like, for example, like myself, happy to have conversations with people. I just enjoy it, you know. I enjoy speaking with you when you're coming up with your ideas, and I do a similar thing with a lot of my other friends, because I just enjoy it. It's fun, you know, coming up with new things and being part of that kind of process. So yeah, learn to enjoy it, but it's not always going to be comfortable.
It's interesting because whenever we do meet up and we go through ideas and start fleshing them out, there's always a specific technique that you use, and I'm always really careful to say, you know, I think it's individual, it's different for each individual, you know, how they brainstorm or come up with kind of new things. But what kind of, for you personally, what kind of like tools and techniques do you use when just fleshing out an idea and building on that?
This is my cheat code. No, so my background's in service design, so pretty much most of the tools I use come from service design, but service design focuses on understanding users and understanding interaction. So that's where I start. I try to understand who's involved and what's their priorities and what's their needs and where's the tension. My research and a lot of the work we did when I was at the uni was around how do we use conflict as a positive, as a creative kind of catalyst. So identify where it's going to be a challenge, you know, if there's politics at play, if there's financially it's going to be tough, you know. Don't be afraid to identify those things, but you need to understand, because mainly I design services and help inform digital products that allow people to access that service. But for me, it's a little bit different from like screen to screen. What you're thinking about is person to person interaction. So from a person inputting something on the screen to where does that go? Who interacts with that? Where do they? Is there a need to? And just really build that ecosystem. Once you've got that as well, that ecosystem, you can identify people you can test with. So if you kind of draw it out, and I've got a range of tools. I think one of them is called the dynamic stakeholder tool. It's a tool I was taught when I was studying. I'll find the reference so you can like put it in, because it's not my tool. Would like to give credit where credit's due. And then, yeah, you can identify people you can speak to. You can begin to use, I like physical space, as you can see on the wall behind me. I like to map things out physically. It helps me articulate it. Like you say, it might not work for other people. Other people might need nicely formatted notes and whatever else. But for me, seeing things visually really helps. So having that map, we literally, if I was in the studio at work, you'd be able to see it. We've got a huge map on the wall that we use to kind of interact with and change around. So once you know those people, once you can start speaking to them, you can start interpreting what they feel, in the sense of like, what's their tasks, what's really important to them in terms of what they're trying to get done, or in the case of a problem, a challenge, why is it so painful for them? What is it that really bugs them? Is it, you know, I think one thing I talk about is don't find symptoms, find the cause. Use the symptoms to find the cause. So if someone's having a bad time with, say, a website, the symptom is, I can't access it, but that's not the cause. There's a whole heap of stuff behind that. Why is that so difficult? And you have to kind of uncover that. Just investigate kind of as thoroughly as you can. And I'm really fortunate that my background supports that. I was a researcher, so I definitely don't kind of do my research to the rigor of an academic level. Now I've got another book that's called Just Enough Research by Erica Hall, and that's what it's about. Just enough. Do enough to inform and allow you to keep moving. You know, it's not about creating a finished object. It's about creating something that's in flux and you're willing to build with and play with and add to and take away and, maybe throw out, maybe you find out through trying to develop one kind of product, you identify another need or another opportunity. Don't be afraid to switch to that. Or if you're capable and have the time, try and build both, but not to a point of like build both with the same effort. Understand that if you're applying your effort to two things, then it's not going to move as fast. So yeah, just kind of try and build that ecosystem, try and form it as best you can with the people you identify. And then just don't be afraid to kind of respond to that. Be willing to respond to what people say.
As much as I don't want to sort of talk too much about what's going on right now, because the whole kind of point of this is to sort of look forward and be a bit more optimistic. But at the same time, I can't help but address the fact that there will be a lot of organizations right now who will be in a rush to develop something quickly that's going to make them money quickly. And so I know there's a lot of UX principles involved in what you do, well, a huge amount, and it's about getting the user needs and the business needs balanced.
Yeah.
So what kind of advice would you give to a business right now who is at a point where they need to come up with something quickly?
Yeah.
They don't have all the time in the world and all the resources in the world. It could be a matter of days. What's the best that you could do right now to create something that is going to like support them in the meantime?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the circumstances we're living through right now are really extreme, but I think the approach applies kind of to any kind of circumstance of change or management of change or requirement for change, is that for me, context is really important. So ideas are great, but to execute an idea, you really need to understand the context it's going to operate in. So if you as a business have been business as usual, same old for a length of time, or you've had to react because of the circumstance, or there is a circumstance you need to change for, understand what that's going to do to the context of your business. So I don't see businesses as these like spreadsheets. I see it as they're organizations of people, collections of people. So trying to understand what you have, around you, and what is there anything in the team, in the organization that you can change to? Has there been talk of it? Have you ever had some previous ideas that maybe now's the time? Be brave in maybe doing that. I think another thing is reflect, pause. Like, I know you're in a rush and it might feel like you've really got to do things at incredible speed, but I always find when you're moving with that, like from my own personal experience of trying to build things and deliver things at like extreme pace, and it's not as effective. So find time to reflect on the context, on the change, what it means, what have you got at your disposal, how best can you do this? And the major thing is, don't be too hard on yourself. Like, this is crazy, currently this is crazy, and some circumstances will be crazy. So just be willing to be honest with yourself about what you can do. And I guess you're going to have to make some very hard decisions. I can't speak to it. I've never been in a situation like that. But for me, it's just context. Try and understand the new context that's emerging in terms of what it means to be a customer for your business, what it means to be an employee for your business. We've gone from a studio environment to completely remote working. We're all working out of our houses, etc. So what does that mean for the business? We're really fortunate that we can still continue, and the kind of way we work and what we do allows us to do this. That might not be the case for some people. So try and determine what can you do, and if you can't do anything, then I guess don't be too hard on yourself. I really enjoy the process of collaborating, as you know, and as kind of anyone I've worked with. For me, that's where the real kind of innovation, whatever your definition of that is, that's where the real that's where the magic happens, per se, if we're going to get cliched.
And it's important to remember as well, though, that if there's if you're running a business by yourself, that doesn't mean that you can't collaborate because you don't have team members. You can
I think
work.
So another thing I've been really fortunate with in the last kind of month, so on Friday there's a group of us that are all kind of design thinkers, doers, all had a call on just Friday morning, and really fortunate. We've got a great community up here in Newcastle, so really fortunate to be part of that and just lean on that. I've got my friend Alex, Alexandria, who I do the Unstudied Social with, which obviously didn't even get launched because we knew this was going to happen. Yeah, so I've got her. I've got like Justine, my friend, who's the fantastic researcher, academic, and just all round absolute. You know, you say I'm a catalyst. She's cut from the same cloth. So yeah, just leaning on people. I'm really fortunate that my kind of experience and early careers as I'm around the people who build things, do things, sell things all the time. So I'm really fortunate in that sense. Yeah, and I'm cheeky. I just ask, just what's the worst that can happen? People say no, and that's fine. Don't be afraid to. If you're not bothered if they say no, just go and ask. Do you mind if you can help me? 10 minutes, 15 minutes, half an hour. Can you spare me whatever time?
Thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you for the invite.